Hey guys, I am Bryn of the Mama on the Rocks, and this is our very first ever Fridays are for Facts, and I'm super excited to have my friend Amy. Amy Smith is here with us, you guys, and she is located in Abingdon, Virginia, just a little hop, skip, and a jump from where we are in Tennessee. And she is an extreme parent. And her son is good friends with our son, and they are I shouldn't say cutest because they're like kind of over that stage right now. They don't think I'm very cool anymore when I say that, but it doesn't matter. I'm still the mom, so I'm going to say it.
They're a pretty cute Nerf gun
Oh my
army,
gosh,
for
they are
sure.
very serious when they Nerf fight. Um, so Amy, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of why you're a good fit for this first show?
Sure. I am a integrative nutritionist. So what that means is that I take a holistic approach to nutrition. So not just looking at food, I also look at, lifestyle choices, sleep, stress, and all of those things that kind of intertwine. And right now, my main focus is behavioral nutrition. So that's as it um, directly relates to ADHD, anxiety, um, eating disorders and disordered eating and high levels of stress. So all of those things that kind of include our mental health and our nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have a pretty strong herbal background, and I kind of started that herbal journey because of my own mental health struggle. I had a traumatic uh, event about 11 years ago that I went through and was then diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety. And so this, whole journey of trying to figure that out has kind of led me to where I am now.
Yeah. And if
Yeah.
you guys didn't know this, a little known fact about Amy is that she makes the world's best elderberry. So if you did not know that and you're in the market, I
Let me
bought some for
know.
my family members. Like after we got ours, I was like, okay, everybody go to her. And Lord knows with all this pandemic stuff, I'm like pumping it full.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you don't mind, just share a little bit about your journey as an extreme parent and how
Sure.
what you do as an integrated nutritionist is helpful for that.
Okay. I have a 13-year-old son. He was diagnosed about a year old with failure to thrive. We started going through all kind of testing to try and figure out what was wrong. We went through the endocrinologist, we went to the geneticist, and just couldn't really get any answers.
Sure.
He received his ADHD diagnosis about second grade when they usually start,
Mm-hmm.
giving that diagnosis. He at that time was just really struggling. He's always been very small. He's usually in about the first percentile on size, so that's always been a huge struggle is making sure that he's getting enough, food intake.
Sure.
We went through years of testing, and pretty much they couldn't figure out what was wrong. They diagnosed him with idiopathic short stature learning disability, ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
and for school reasons, basically just a health, overall health impairment.
Sure.
So we kind of gave up on the journey. I'm sure if we continued now that, genetics changes so much every
Mm-hmm.
year that we probably could get a diagnosis, but we kind of gave up on it about 3 years ago. It was just too stressful for our
Oh yeah.
family and we weren't getting any answers
Yeah.
and it was stressful for him. He had a huge fear of the doctor and, it just wasn't worth it for us anymore. So we kind of just, decided to stop all of it. We did decide to medicate a couple years
Mm-hmm.
ago, and that was a huge game changer for us. We had, being an herbalist, I wanted to try all the natural means that I could
Yeah.
first, and we tried and we tried, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So we did medicate, and we have been for a couple years, about 4 years now,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes a world of difference for us.
Yeah.
Um, he is still very small for his age, and it's something that we'll struggle with. We had his annual IEP today, so that's always fun. And they're making modifications and things as we need it, and it's a struggle, but he's doing well,
Sure.
and he's finally growing a little bit, and we're just doing what we can as we hit the teenage years, which is
I
stressful
think
in
that's why
itself.
he and Briggs love each other so much because they're both the tiniest and
Yeah,
thus so adorable, but
yeah,
so mean with those Nerf guns.
yeah, relentless.
Right. So I want you to just kind of lead us through, like, I've sort of touched on and of course written about our journey we did about 3.5 years of holistic approaches, everything from dietary restrictions to chiropractic care, essential oils, CBD, everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course you see some results, but not enough improvement that it can really give your child an opportunity to succeed, at least in our experience.
Yeah.
So, however, that being said, we do still have some dietary restrictions that are necessary because of triggering his diagnosis. So kind of talk to us about what sort of paths what sort of options do we have, and what does that look like as far as
Okay.
behavioral health?
Yeah, perfect. So I've got some slides I made, so I'm going to share my screen and you can tell me
Awesome.
if you can see it. And, all right, can you see that?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So a couple of things I just wanted to talk about today were things that we had just, kind of discussed, things that you can potentially change that you could see results with. And there's two approaches to this. So my nutritional side is very evidence-based, and I look for the science to back things up. But let's just be real. As parents, sometimes we just have to take that anecdotal,
Yeah.
evidence as it is, and some things work. And just because the science doesn't back it up, doesn't mean it's not going to work for our children.
Sure.
So really, I feel like this is just a very huge empowerment. Do what feels right for your family and for your kids, and if just because someone says something works or doesn't work for them does not mean it's not going to work for you.
Right.
So kind of just disclaimer going into that.
Hey, before you go any further, would you just
Mm-hmm.
tell us a little bit about Solstice Nutrition? Because I know that's a
Sure,
new
yeah.
business for you.
Yeah, so we are based in Abingdon, Virginia, but I do virtual services. So I do individual and family services. And so right now I'm very behavioral based, but I do cover just general nutrition. So anyone that's looking for support in those areas, especially women with high levels of stress, I see a lot of, that anxiety. Um, and times are a little different now, than they were a month ago or 2 months
Sure.
ago. And so, the people that I'm seeing now are just, really kind of struggling with their mental health, and,
Yeah.
and nutrition plays a very big role in that, much larger than people realize usually.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see clients, we start by looking at nutrition, but incorporate all that other stuff, stress coping mechanisms and sleep and hydration and all those things that play into it.
Sure.
And I'll post my website after
Yeah, definitely.
the thing. But yeah, I'm definitely taking new clients. I also see families. So if your family is struggling with kind of knowing what direction to go, then
That's
let me know. I can
awesome.
definitely offer some services.
That's awesome.
So today we're going to talk about a couple things. I want to talk about food dyes because I feel like that's a huge, huge area that we can see changes in. Gluten is something we get asked about all the time, so I wanted to
Right.
make sure I covered that. I want to talk about allergies a little bit because that is something that seasonally is happening right now, but also is very prominent in children who have behavioral diagnoses. And I want to talk about sugar because every parent wants to know,
Right.
should I be cutting the sugar or should I not? And then I've got some tips for picky eaters because I have
Awesome.
a very picky eater.
Yes, we have
Yeah.
gone camping with him, and let me tell you what, it's an impressive level of pickiness.
He is very picky. Yeah. So, so the food dyes and behavior is, it's been, the science behind it has been around for a long time, about 50 years, but right now the science on it is huge because there's
Mm-hmm.
people seeing results with it. So it started in about the 1970s, and this Dr. Fingold, he was seeing that there was a huge connection between the rise of diagnosis of ADHD and the increased use of artificial flavors and colors in food. So he did a lot of science between the two, and
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of providing evidence that this is definitely the case.
Mm-hmm.
The more that our food started to have these preservatives and things in it, the more cases of ADHD we saw.
Sure.
So there's a little bit of mix in the science, though, because a lot of the studies I found, they were doing the studies on kids that didn't have a behavioral diagnosis. So
Hmm.
there was no way to tell, the study was basically just irrelevant to
Right.
the fact. Um, so, the main thing to think about is that it's just so multifaceted and every kid is going to react differently. So, you know, there there's not a ton of science that backs it, but there's a ton of anecdotal evidence that
Sure.
supports it. Do you want to kind of share your experience with cutting out the food dyes with Briggs?
Yeah, so the first elimination diet we ever did was actually recommended by our holistic chiropractor, and he was 4, and so we did not have a diagnosis yet, but the behaviors and the aggression was very pronounced at that time. And so he recommended us doing a 60-day elimination diet where we base, and I had done that before for my migraine headaches.
Mm.
So you essentially only feed very bland and dry foods. And so, I mean, and he's a pretty picky eater. So we were not consuming very many, a variety of foods at that time.
Yeah.
And then you gradually, after 60 days, add back in a few things so you can figure out what the triggers are. So for him, it's very funny because ever since he was about 4.5, he could give you like a dissertation on red dye 40 and why it's the worst thing ever and no one should ever eat it.
That's so funny because Aiden says when we were eating M&Ms or something, Briggs gave me all the red ones.
Yes. Yeah, and he for sure will do that. And so yeah, we've had many conversations where he's been at a friend's house and he's like, they looked at me kind of funny because they were eating strawberry Pop-Tarts and I was like, hold on, I can't have that because it has red dye 40. Like there are a lot of reasons you can't have that, but yes, that's one of them.
Yeah.
But really red dye 40 for him, red dye 40 is a huge migraine trigger for me. Like if I have it in anything within about 30 minutes, I'm going to have an onset of a migraine. And with our son, a lot of what we see as far as our mental health that's genetic are things that I have suffered from but didn't get diagnosed until my 30s. And then Briggs has a similar diagnosis. And so it's kind of awesome to be able to sort of empathize with him with a lot of those things. Red dye 40 for him is a major aggression trigger. We don't really see much of it with yellow or blue dyes, but we just eliminate all food dyes for the most part. We're not as strict as we are with gluten. We are strictly gluten-free.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have celiac, so we aren't like, if a pizza is cooked in a place that also has, rice flour, wheat flour, or white flour, that's fine. But we are very strict about red dye. And then we try to keep everything else as minimally as possible. But I mean, we eat a pretty whole foods diet. So.
Yeah. And the elimination diet it's stressful. It's not easy.
Oh, heck no.
So
and my family was not for it. Let me just say.
It is a huge struggle. And it is not something that I take lightly as a practitioner for adults or children. Like I'm not going to recommend you do an elimination diet unless we've tried a bazillion other things,
right?
Because it's extremely stressful.
Yeah,
it can create more anxiety. It's a situation where you have to look at everything, and that's kind of what I was talking about on the slide. Here's first thing you're going to have to do if you decide that this is something you want to try is learn to read the label, because you'll have no idea. Just like you said, the strawberry Pop-Tarts, it could be in anything. Toothpaste, your lotions that you use, your medications. You have to read the label on every single thing that you're bringing in your house that's not a whole food.
That was very mind-blowing for me. And I mean, I started and ran a health and nutrition camp for girls, when Spence and I first met. That's what I was doing. And so for the longest time, and I've always struggled with my weight, and so I've always known to read the labels and what I'm looking for and what to pair with things. And so I think of myself as at least somewhat educated, but I was shocked to find how crazy things, like as far as the dyes, especially with those, what was in stuff. And then I know you're going to talk about sugars in a minute, but how many sugars are in things that pass as even a whole food sometimes.
And there's like 80 names for sugar, like there's things that are sugar that you don't even know.
And the same goes with gluten. You have to learn what specific things you can have. And it's almost easier to learn what you can have than what you can't have, because they name it so many things. It's just difficult to keep up with. Yeah.
And with the dyes, especially like the red 40, sometimes it could be called Allure red.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on where the product comes from, if it's from Europe, it could be called something else. So you have to kind of be aware of that too.
Right.
Like this label that's on the screen, they've got the red 40. Then they've also got, great turmeric for color, which is fantastic choice. Mm-hmm. But then they also have the yellow 6 and the blue 1. So
not enough turmeric. We're going to need the yellow 6 that up.
Yeah. So definitely. So that's, if that's something that you think that you want to try with your child, you're going to have to, that's the first thing. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to go through every single thing you own in your cabinet, and you're going to have to plan on spending a lot more time at the grocery store, because until you learn, it's going to take you some time to figure out where those dyes are.
And I think too, don't just think you can go to a Whole Foods or a Fresh Market or something and and everything is just going to magically be okay, because it's not.
And
And
that's a
so,
huge misconception that everything at Whole Foods is healthy. That's
right,
not at all true.
that's
And we're
right,
going to talk about it with the gluten in just a minute. But yeah, that just because those things are there does not mean they are a healthy choice.
right.
Now, are they more organic or natural? Maybe, the
Hmm.
ingredients might be better, but that doesn't mean that they're healthier.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. So there is some great options if you're looking to substitute. So Annie's Foods makes get great products. They have like fruit snacks,
Hmm.
even things like their macaroni and cheese, which they do make a gluten-free one, but like
Right.
their cheese isn't artificially colored.
Right.
So Annie's is always a great option. Usually pretty safe as far as the dyes. Of course, still check the label. Stonyfield makes great products.
Hmm.
And Honest Kids is a great substitution for juices, and most of theirs are clear, which are also
Right.
great. And I don't know if you saw, I think it was maybe last summer, Otter Pops was making dye-free popsicles, and they were like the grossest looking colors, and people were
Yes.
so excited about them.
Listen, I ordered them, and hand
Did
to
you?
God, it looked like someone dipped them in pond water.
Yeah,
And my kids were like, absolutely freaking not. I am not
yeah,
eating that mud stick. Thanks a
yeah,
lot, but no.
yeah. So they
I
tried. They're
ate
like,
them.
I give them
They
props.
were
Like they
good,
tried.
but they looked gross.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is options. This Natural Candy Store is an online website of all just candy, and everything, it's different brands, but everything on there is, has no dyes, artificial colors,
Oh,
no
awesome.
artificial flavors, and it's naturalcandystore.com. They also have like vegan chocolate, which is fantastic if you're doing dairy free.
Yeah.
And they had a ton of Easter stuff. We're kind of late for that because of shipping issues,
Hmm.
but for holidays or just in
Hmm.
general, if you're looking, that they have, it's a huge database of things that are good options if you're trying to find some
That's
things.
awesome.
So yeah, so that's super important there. All right, so let's talk about gluten, unless you have anything else to add about the dyes.
No, I'm sure I'm going to have an opinion about this, though. So you go ahead.
Okay. So and that's absolutely okay. So the thing about the gluten is there's a lot of misconceptions, because right now a lot of people just think that gluten is bad,
Right.
right? So people are cutting gluten to lose weight, and people are cutting gluten for not necessarily therapeutic reasons. They're
Right.
just cutting it because they think it's going to help them lose weight.
Totally agree.
So that's not the approach, right? So gluten is not bad. um, there is a lot of research right now that is in the US that is talking about or exploring the idea that it's not necessarily the gluten that's causing reactions, it is the pesticides used on
Yeah.
the wheat,
Yep.
right? So it could be the Roundup that's causing the issues. So
If
I
you
have a
haven't, have you watched that documentary on Netflix called What's with Wheat?
yeah, yeah,
Oh, can I tell you, like Spence teases me because I'm such a nerd for documentaries, and he came in when. Are you okay? What's wrong, honey? Okay, just climb up here with me. Um. Anyway, it was on, and he came in and he was like, "What are you watching?" And he like was hooked, like had to watch it.
yeah, yeah.
Lay down. Hey, you're okay. Are you having some belly aches? Well, this is appropriate for this, isn't
Yeah.
it? Come here and lay with me. Looking at yourself in the mirror isn't going to help you feel better. Snuggle up with mama. Come here. Come here. Look, it's Aiden's mama. Do you want to say hi? All right.
Yeah, so it's um
Hey.
there's definitely, some different thoughts about it. So the science is totally inconclusive on the effectiveness of
Hey, go
cutting
to the
gluten
bathroom.
from diets for ADHD and autism treatment. So the science is not there. Again, it doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So there does seem to be a link between kids that have ADHD and autism, and they have higher risk of celiac disease, which could
Mm-hmm.
be why that's more effective. So if your child does have celiac or a gluten sensitivity, by cutting out gluten, all aspects of their life are going to be better. So their mental health is going to be better. They're going to feel better within days. So if it's there, it will definitely make a difference if there is
Yeah.
an intolerance. Um, so the main bless his heart. So
Spence is with him. He's okay.
oh, So the main thing, like we were talking about before, is the gluten-free does not mean healthy. So just
Right.
because you're eating gluten-free items, it doesn't mean you're eating a healthier diet. Um, and like we talked about before, it can be very pricey if you're all of a sudden having to get
Yes.
gluten-free items. It's much more expensive than non-gluten items, and it can just be stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so especially when you're sending your kid to a birthday party and they're having
Oh
pizza,
my
and
goodness.
it's like it can definitely be a tough situation for kids.
Well, I think too
Um,
it is like educating your kids about it, and then
mhm,
also being prepared for situations like that. Like, our close friends that we would hang out with, most of them know that he's gluten free, so they usually
yeah,
tend to ask ahead of time, or we make sure we have something there. And there, of course, anything you cut out, whether you cut out dairy or gluten or sugar or dyes or whatever, there's going to be that option for you at the store to get something or to make
yeah,
something to replace that item. So I think it's just about educating
yeah,
yourself, and then as is age appropriate, letting your kids know why they
yeah.
can have something or what they can have instead.
Absolutely. And, just like the nutrition part of me just wants to, that's the whole gluten free is not healthy. Like just going and buying boxes of processed foods that say gluten
Oh
free are
yeah.
not going to serve the purpose. They might, help with the point that they are not eating gluten, but um, really just turning to those whole foods is going to be
Yeah,
the
for
best
sure.
option for that. So, if you think your child has celiac disease or a gluten sensitivity, you can, the best thing you can do is eliminate for a couple weeks and see if there's a difference.
Yeah.
um, so, and if it's something that you're kind of toying around with right now, is kind of an ideal time to do that, because there is no birthday parties, there is no school
Right.
lunches, there is no things where that you could, everyone's at home, you could kind of control that intake.
I would
um,
say too, is just make sure that however you're educating yourself, that you check your sources, because things like documentaries and
Absolutely.
everything are sometimes paid for by certain
Yes.
sections of the industries that want you
Yeah.
to believe a certain thing because they're selling products.
Yep.
And the other part of it is understanding that, um, having sensitivities to certain things, or being impacted by the absence of things, we're not replacing those gluten items with the exact same product. So for instance, especially if you have a sensory sensitive kiddo,
Hmm.
we have I cannot tell you how many brands of frozen pizza we have tasted before
Yep.
we came to one that was acceptable, because everything is a different texture. The
Yep.
same goes if you cut dairy. There's going to be that difference that they will try to make it, but it's just not the same.
Yep.
So just understanding that, rice noodles do not look and taste the same.
Yeah.
Rice flour or cauliflower pizza crust is not the exact same. So just understanding, and if you are willing, going through it with your child, I think is really
Yeah.
important.
Absolutely.
um my
Yeah.
husband is definitely pizza, or is like, meat and beer all the way, and so he
Hmm.
was not the one, although he was willing.
Yeah.
So I have cut out almost all gluten with Briggs, and it's been great, and
Yeah.
we've been able to. We both at one point cried over tacos, and that was a bonding moment because it
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah, for sure. It's
um,
not easy by any means, but it can
no,
make a world of difference to
of
somebody who
course,
has a sensitivity, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, my gut, my gut health is
yeah.
better, my mental health is better, my energy is better. So,
Well,
y-
that relationship, I think, from gut to brain is, we're just now starting to scratch the
yes.
surface of that science. And so that's so important that you're talking about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and gluten is a number one thing on that, the gut brain axis is, as soon as you're eating that gluten, like I said, if you cut out gluten and there's a sensitivity, you're going to notice a difference within maybe 24 hours. It's not
Yeah.
going to take 2 weeks like other things might.
Yeah.
You're going to notice a difference pretty quickly. If you do think that your kid does have an allergy, I mean, does have celiac, there is, testing for that. You could get an IgA test. The biggest issue with that is that it won't be accurate if you've been eliminating gluten. So just, keep that in mind. If you do go to the doctor and say, I want to get a test, I think my child has celiac. If they haven't eaten gluten in 3 months, it's not going to be accurate. So
Right.
just kind of keep that in mind. Now, based on all the research that I did, the removal of artificial dyes was way more effective than removing gluten. So if you're kind of on the edge about which one to try first, removing the dyes would maybe be the best approach going in, and it might be a
I
little bit
totally agree.
easier,
Yeah.
and you might see effect, the difference pretty quickly.
I agree. I would say, especially if the behaviors that your child experiences, and I can only speak from my own experience and my own research, but is if any of them are like particularly aggressive,
Yes.
that's huge.
Yeah, and absolutely, and that's the research is definitely conclusive with that, that the red, especially the red 40,
Yeah.
can lead to those aggressive behaviors.
Yeah.
So definitely something to keep in mind. I did want to talk a little bit about gluten and anxiety though, because as adults, this is something that is very evidence based. So there is quite a bit of evidence that's showing the elimination of gluten can reduce anxiety disorders, and it's the same connection, that gut-brain connection. And I just want to kind of share a story. I had a client. She is sophomore in college. She's had anxiety her whole life. She had an ADHD diagnosis when she was in elementary school, and she's kind of battled with it into college. And she had tried to go keto. She was overweight and wanted to do keto to lose weight, which as a nutritionist, I have a whole nother opinion about. We won't get into, but she was doing keto and it was effective. She was losing weight and she noticed that her anxiety had decreased tremendously. So she was having, 20 panic attacks a week, and it had decreased to 1 or 2. So that was huge
Wow.
for her. So, she went along and eventually the keto kind of caught up with her. It wasn't really sustainable for her, which I see a lot for people.
Mhm.
She had lost weight, but she was over not being able to eat
Yeah.
fruit and things like that. So she started, she got off the keto and started eating carbs again. Well, she noticed that when she increased the gluten, all of her anxiety and all of her panic attacks came back.
Huh.
So she went and got tested. They said, no, you don't have celiac. Well, this is a great, proof that it doesn't matter if you have celiac. If you have the sensitivity, which there's no test for, the only
Hmm.
test is you don't eat it,
Hmm.
that, it could make a difference. So she stopped eating the gluten, but was still eating carbs, still getting her fruit and her whole
Hmm.
foods. And almost immediately the anxiety went decreased again and all of her panic
Wow.
attacks decreased. So for people that do have high anxiety, it can be effective. So I have high anxiety and I tried it and it didn't make any difference for me. But everyone is different. So it is
Sure.
something that you could definitely try. I mean, what's it gonna hurt
Of
if you're,
course.
especially if you have extremely high anxiety,
Hmm.
you're pretty much willing to try anything.
Yeah.
So it is something that is pretty evidence based. So I'm sure that
Right.
that is probably the same for children. There's just not the research behind it like there is for adults.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. I see April jumped on. So if
Hey,
April has any
April.
questions, you just let us know, okay? Um, so I just want to talk a little bit about allergies. This is kind of not really related, but there was a lot, right now with it being seasonally high allergy season. I just wanted to share that there was a pretty high correlation in the science between allergies and ADHD. So children that have ADHD are much more likely to have asthma, allergies, to get the pink eye kind of symptoms. So that's something to keep in mind with food allergies too, that those things kind of work hand in hand.
Sure.
So if you feel like that's something that your kid may be suffering from, you can get the allergy testing done. Or, like my son has pretty bad allergies, so he has to take allergy medicine every day.
Hmm.
So does Briggs have allergy? I mean, besides the gluten and things, does he seem to have any other allergies?
No, we've been pretty fortunate with that.
Okay. Yeah. So it is pretty prevalent. So just something to keep in mind. And
Yeah.
that can transfer over to food as well.
Go to the bathroom or go see Daddy.
All right, so let's talk about sugar because every parent wants to know, should I cut sugar? What's the deal with sugar? So, um, sugar is a lot like gluten. There's not a lot of science that backs it up. So they really wanted sugar to be bad, and so there's a lot of research saying, oh, sugar causes hyperactivity, but all the research is inconclusive. So there's not the science to back that up. Um, so the main thing I think with sugar is just to keep in mind that moderation is key, and kind of just explore what works for your child. You know, if allowing them to have a treat at the after dinner works for your family, then do it. If
Hmm.
having sugary cereal is the only thing they'll eat in the morning and that works for your family, then do it. Um, you know, the main thing is just like watching how much sugar they're having. And I think the other, important thing with sugar is just to consider that whatever you teach them now, they're going to carry into their adult life. So if you're, teaching them that, having a dessert or, a celebration, treat is fine. They're going to carry that into adulthood. Um, and, just to keep in mind too, that restriction of candy can often lead to binge behaviors, and disordered eating as a teenager and as an adult. So I had a client who was a very prime example of this. Her mother was obsessively dieting her whole life, always doing the latest fad diet, had no sugar in the house. And so when she was about 14, she started hiding the sugar. She would buy it from the vending machines or at the gas station. She would bring it home, hide it under her bed, and then binge on it at night when everyone was sleeping, and then make herself sick. The mom would wake up, she'd have all the candy papers hidden in her bedroom, and it just really led to this disordered eating situation. And so when she came to see me, it was not necessarily like that she had an eating disorder. She was just sneaking the candy because she was restricted of it. So I think that that's something to really keep in mind, is that the habits we're teaching them now are going to carry over. So if we tell them that no sugar is ever allowed, as soon as they have access to sugar, they're going to eat it, and, just really watching how much sugar they eat is key. Is there an exact amount of sugar that's okay? That's going to depend on your child and, how you feel. Keep in mind that it does feed the bad bacteria in the gut. So it can cause like dysbiosis if you're eating too much sugar and they're not getting enough, of the other bacteria to kind of even it out. And excessive sugar intake can lead, to obesity and blood sugar regulation issues and health concerns later in life. So just kind of, playing with what you feel is okay in your family. Like we let Aiden have, a brownie at the end of the day. It's not a big deal. If we go out to dinner, we'll share a dessert. It's not a big deal.
Right.
Just really, and watching the sugary drinks, I think, is a huge thing too. Like, not just using the Kool-Aid and things in place of water, because they can end up getting a lot of sugar that way that we're not really accounting for.
Yeah.
So do you guys restrict sugar, or how's your approach?
It's interesting Briggs is sitting in here now and not in bed, because he probably has an opinion on this. We have gone through your belly hurts, I know. We do not keep a lot of sugary stuff in our house, mostly just because my husband is a closet candy eater. So he will have I will get up in the morning and there'll be a Reese cup graveyard just on our counter. And my kids really like that too. I'm not a big sweets person, so it doesn't bother me so much. I will say one thing that helped us is introducing things. I prefer a dark chocolate. And so introducing things like that when they're young, then they don't crave the other stuff as much. Not that it doesn't exist, but and so we usually have a bag of candy, and so they can earn that during the day, or they can have that at night if they are good eaters at supper. Now, have we had issues with sneaking? 100%, absolutely. Yeah. So Briggs just piped up. He said, so for us, that's something we typically after a holiday, like Halloween or, Easter coming up or whatever, we talk to our kids about it. Like I said, he knows he can't have red dye. So, that's something we pull out automatically. And then they're able to keep a certain amount of things. But have we found wrappers everywhere? 100%.
And there's not a whole lot of, if it's in the house, they're going to find it. So if you're, like you said, if your approach is that you're going to cut back on what they can have, then you're going to have to just not have that. They're going to find it, So, if you are choosing to use candy as a treat, which is totally okay, just choosing good quality, like you said, dark chocolate, or chocolate covered blueberries, or peanut butter and chocolate, things that you can, are a little just more healthier than just, Reese peanut butter cups or donuts like the picture. So there is better options, but like I said, the main thing is just kind of watch the behavior around it. And, if your kid eats 3 candy bars and they're jumping off the walls, then don't feed them 3 candy bars, And on the side of the screen there, I just wanted to kind of bring this up for adults. And, I'm sure it's the same for children, but again, the science isn't there. So when we eat sugar, or a large, amount of sugar, it causes inflammation in the body, which causes anxiety, which causes more inflammation. So if you're eating a lot of sugar, you can kind of get in this cycle where, especially if you're high anxiety as it is, where you're just causing more inflammation, which is causing you to suffer, from more mental health issues.
Yeah.
So, again, cutting it out is not necessarily going to be the best idea, because then you're going to have, you're going to be craving it. And it's the same thing. If you don't have any sugar for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden there's donuts, you're going to eat 6 instead of the one
Right.
you should have just had. So, just something to kind of keep in mind that, it does have a correlation to anxiety. It's just a matter of moderation.
And I think it goes back to that gut health again,
Absolutely.
that inflammation and
Yeah.
there's just so
And the
much.
bad bacteria love sugar.
Yeah.
And there's also, something to keep in mind too, is there's great alternatives to just, plain sugar. You can use honey,
Hmm.
you can use maple syrup, agave syrup, there is stevia. There is other things that are, better choices than just, plain, white sugar. So
Right.
there is, good options. And that website I shared a few slides before from that candy, the natural candy website, they have a lot of things that are made with, um, better quality sweeteners rather than artificial sweeteners or fructose corn syrup, or
Sure.
things like that. So, all right. So let's talk about picky eaters. So this is like my kid right there. He is like the biggest picky
Yeah.
eater. Oh, April's
April
like,
raising her hand.
yeah.
She said it
All
right.
right. So I feel like this is a huge battle when it comes. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with behavioral diagnosis, just because a lot of it has to do with sensory.
Yeah.
Like you said, the pizza thing, that's how Aiden is with chicken nuggets. He will only eat Tyson chicken nuggets. And
Hmm.
if they're a different kind, he knows it and it's not happening.
Right.
So, it's definitely a struggle. So, um, the first thing I want to talk about, just, in case anyone in the group did have a child with a ARFID diagnosis, this is not the same as a picky eater. So avoidant restrictive food intake disorder is considered an eating disorder. And basically children that are diagnosed with this usually avoid eating food, not because of body images. It's not the kind of eating disorder where they're afraid of gaining weight or something like that. It's just strictly sensory processing.
Hmm.
And they're usually very highly selective on their eating habits. A lot of children with autism, and quite a few with ADHD are often develop ARFID, and that it's often a co-occurring with anxiety, because the eating process gives them anxiety.
Hmm.
So if this is something that that your child has a diagnosis of, just make sure you're working with the pediatrician. You'd have to go to a pediatrician or a mental health professional to get this diagnosis. They diagnose it the same way as they would like an anxiety disorder. But they, definitely get, if you feel like this is something that's going on beyond them just being picky, then definitely reach out to your pediatrician. There is some
Interesting.
pickiness that's normal, but this is definitely a mental health diagnosis. So,
Sure.
um, you know, if you feel like the pickiness is beyond that, definitely reach out and, ask your mental health professional about it. And then, work with, nutrition specialists that can kind of help. Um, Usually children that have this diagnosis have a huge failure to thrive, and they depend on supplementation to live. So oftentimes they end up on, feeding tubes
Hmm.
or, something like that, because they're just not consuming enough calories. So I just wanted to kind of mention that while we were talking about picky eaters. All right. So with picky eaters, the number one concern is, I never know where to put the camera thing. The number one concern is that they're getting enough food. So, like the hierarchy of needs, the pyramid where you have to get the bottom thing on the pyramid before you can get the next one.
Hmm.
It's the same way with food. So there's Dr. Satter's created a food pyramid, and the bottom part of the pyramid is just getting enough food. Until somebody gets enough food, we can't move up to the next one, which is preference of food. So we have to make sure they're getting enough intake to even think about moving up, introducing new things. So
Sure.
sometimes with picky eaters, it's just a matter of letting them eat what they want, which is not necessarily what every parent wants to hear, because you want them to eat healthy, but they have to be getting enough calories, or we start turning into, the failure to thrive starts becoming more prevalent, and then other issues start to, increase. So we want to make sure they're getting enough calories first off. And so that's, of course, going to depend on how old your child is. So if you have any questions about how many calories your kid should be eating, shoot me an email and I can kind of guide you on that, or you can definitely look it up online.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be different. Boys and girls and ages are going to be different.
Yeah.
And then we want to just make sure they're getting enough water. So hydration is crucial for mental health, and this is for us too. And always just want to remind moms, like, if you have a 5% decrease in your body fluid, your concentration decreases by 70%.
Oh my God.
So when you're sitting at the computer and you're like, I can't concentrate, I can't keep my mind on this, think about whether you drank any water today, because it has a huge, huge correlation to our mental health.
Wow.
Yeah. So rule of thumb is take your body weight and divide that in half, and that's how many ounces of water you should be drinking, not to exceed 100. So, depending on your body weight, same thing for your children. So if your child is 80 pounds, they should be drinking 40 ounces of fluid. Now that's all fluids, but not anything sugary.
Right.
So as an adult, you could count, water, tea, things that don't have sugar in them.
Mm-hmm.
There's, some debate whether you can count coffee. I say yes, because I feel
I'm
like
definitely
coffee is an herb. Coffee is an herb.
I need to count that.
Yeah. So just really think about that, and especially as when you're thinking about your own self-care, and you're like, I can't think what is going on, or I have a headache. Think about how much water you drink, because a lot of times that can be a direct effect of how we're feeling. And then we of course want to make sure they're getting enough nutrients, and if they're not, then that's where supplementation is often going to come in. So with there is some options for supplementing. So there is a lot of meal replacement options. Kate's Farm is a great quality option. They have complete meal replacement. So they have, if your child had a feeding tube, you could use it as a complete meal replacement. They also just make it in drinks. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing product, but it's expensive. Mm-hmm. So, if depending on where you're at, what your family can afford, if what you can afford is the powder that you mix with milk, then go for it. Mm-hmm. Whatever you can get, use it, and don't feel bad about that. So Aiden loves those Boost milks. Mm-hmm. They're like, and he'll drink the whole thing with no problem, and it's packed with vitamins and minerals.
Right.
So whatever you can get them to take, go for it.
Yeah.
Who cares if it's chocolate? Go for it.
Briggs loves the Stonyfield has a protein yogurt smoothie, and that's like his favorite thing. They are expensive, so we only get them when I have a coupon or they're on sale. Yeah. Honey, I'm so happy you want to say hi to Miss Amy and you feel better, but I'm still on a work call. Thank you.
So, so just keep that in mind. Would it be ideal if we could all afford the best thing? That'd be great, but we can't. Right. So just go with what you can get and feel confident in that, and just go for it. So if your kid is not eating enough food and you think that they would drink one of those, absolutely try it, because it's a great way to get the vitamins and minerals in. Multivitamins are also going to be pretty important for picky eaters, because we know they're not getting the phytonutrients and the fruits and vegetables that they need. So multivitamins will probably be pretty important. So with multivitamins for parents and kids, you just really want to think, really focus on the quality. So, again, buy the best that you can with what you can afford, but really look at, trying to buy things that are free of the dyes and things like that. So Smarty Pants makes a great gummy option. It is gluten-free, dairy-free, allergen-free, dye-free, and preservative-free. They're about $20 at Target for about a month's supply. There's usually coupons on the Target app. Mm-hmm. And they are a great option. They also make a really good fiber supplement, a probiotic, which is super important for the gut health. They do have a little bit of sugar in them, which most of those gummy vitamins do, but if that's what they'll take, then, I say go for it. And their multivitamins do have a good amount of omega-3s in them, which are going to be very important for mental health and cognitive function. So when you're choosing a vitamin, try and just buy the best quality that your budget allows. And if you need help with that, shoot me an email and I can send over some ideas. But those Smarty Pants, I feel like, are just a good option for most people, and most people can afford them. Like, they usually have coupons.
And Amazon will deliver them straight to your doorstep, FYI.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they're a good, and Smarty Pants makes tons of products,
Oh
not just
yeah.
those. So they're a company that I feel pretty confident standing
Yeah.
behind. So they're a good option. And I would say if you have a picky eater, you definitely need to consider multivitamins. Unless your child's eating, 5 servings of vegetables a day and 4 servings of fruit, you probably need to consider a multivitamin just because they're not getting the nutrients that they need.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so what can we do if we have a picky eater? So the first thing that we want to talk about is just like replacing foods. So this sounds great, but it's not always very easy. So, you could try and swap the wheat bread for the white bread. This actually worked for us. He actually didn't notice a difference, and now he like prefers it. So it could work. Some kids, they're not going to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you could try the wheat pasta or the veggie pasta instead of the regular pasta. Again, if they're a texture based child, that might not work.
Yeah.
You could also try like a veggie sauce rather than just a plain tomato sauce. And before, I meant to say this earlier, but just really the main thing is to not stress about it. If all they'll eat is chicken nuggets and Cheetos, then just feed them chicken nuggets and Cheetos and do the best you can.
Right.
You know, and offer them other things. They'll usually turn it down, or at least my kid does. Usually what we'll do, because he doesn't eat the same thing as us because he's super picky, so my husband will make dinner and then have him try our dinner. He'll usually have 1 bite because that's required.
Mm-hmm.
He'll usually say it's good, and then we'll say, do you want some more? And he'll say, no, I'm good, that's okay. So
Yep.
he'll eat it, the bite, but then it won't go beyond that.
Yep.
Yeah.
That sounds quite familiar.
Yeah. So at least, you're trying, just do the best you can. But if all they'll eat, sometimes it's just not worth the fight.
Yeah.
If it's dinner time and everyone's had a stressful day, it's just not worth fighting about it.
And
So
I mean,
just,
we talked at the beginning about having smaller children. Like, of course, we've had those conversations with our pediatrician,
mm-hmm.
and the different places we've lived in. Every one of them and behavior specialists have said, like, listen, he's super athletic, he's super healthy.
Yep.
Like, yeah, he's small, but so is his dad. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
worried, like overly worried about it. And yes, your dad. And he'll eat when he's hungry, and
Yeah.
some of that is medication. And I think if you've medicated
Yes.
your child for certain things, especially if they're on stimulants or anything, that is going to affect their appetite,
Yeah.
from one extreme to the other. And so I think it's just like, we've always been told, like, they'll eat when they're hungry.
Yep.
And usually in the morning when he has a stimulant medication, he rarely will eat breakfast, we'll always offer it. And I used to stress about that so hard, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like giving yourself grace. And then a little bit after lunchtime, he'll be hungry. And by dinner, you can't feed him enough. And
Yes, Aiden's the same way.
yeah,
Yep.
so you just have to roll
And
with it. And I think
and
it's
give
one of
yourself
those,
a break. Like
oh
you're doing
yeah.
the best you can. Just, do what you can. Like
I
I said,
mean,
sometimes it's not worth the fight.
put that in the file of crap you'll get judged about,
Yeah.
regardless of whether. It doesn't matter if I feed my kid tomatoes and corn only.
Yeah.
Someone's going to be like, corn's a starchy vegetable. Like, okay,
Yeah.
back it up, Karen.
And my husband he was talking about the camping trip when Clover was like eating blueberries or something.
Mm,
Our kid would never eat a damn blueberry off a plate, and
yep,
that's okay.
yep,
And really, I always think back to when he was a baby and like, is it my fault that I didn't feed him those things? And maybe I only fed him chicken nuggets. Well, no, I tried.
sure.
And give yourself a break. Just do the best you can. And that's coming from a nutritionist. Like my
Yeah.
kid does not eat vegetables, not a single one,
Hmm.
and that's just how life
And let me
goes.
tell you
So
what, being friends with a nutritionist whose kid eats chicken nuggets makes me feel like I'm like, listen, I can breathe. I don't have to
yeah,
stress out. Like,
yeah,
it's
it's
good. You
not
want
worth
chicken
it.
nuggets? You go ahead.
Yeah. Yep. So, and our pediatricians always told us the same thing. Just let him eat.
Yeah.
Let him eat because he was, had failure to thrive and he was
Yep.
low weight. If that's what he wants, then let him eat it.
That's
So,
right.
yeah. So there is always the option of sneaking food, and this is really not my favorite thing because I feel like it hurts the trust,
Stop.
of you feeding your kid what you say you're feeding them.
Right.
Now that being said, there is ways that we can add vegetables, not necessarily lie about it, but add them to things and hope that they'll try them. So baked goods are a really good option. There's a couple recipes I'll put on the Facebook page. One is for black bean brownies that have chocolate chips in them. They're very moist and yummy, and you can't really tell that they're made with black beans. So, something like that. I also have a recipe for avocado banana peanut butter balls that are like energy
Oh,
balls. They're super simple to make and they're like chocolatey. So
yeah.
there is some things like that you could try. You can always try to add things to like pizza. So,
Yeah.
you could add zucchini and, veggies
I
to
have
pizza.
had a pumpkin chocolate chip zucchini bread that was crazy
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So there's all over the internet, there's all kinds of options for, baked goods that have veggies in them. You can always try and add more veggies to sauces, especially like spaghetti sauce. If you put those veggies in the blender and they blend down, they're not the texture will go away and it will be like a tomato sauce with some extra veggies in it. There is a cookbook called The Sneaky Chef, which is specifically made for picky eaters. So there is some ideas in there about just putting stuff in. Nutritional yeast is something that you can add to foods and it usually kind of disappears and it's got some nutritional value and you can't even really tell it's there. Um, Flaxseed is, full of omega-3s and you can usually add it to baked goods or smoothies and you can't tell it's there. So if your kid will eat, drink a smoothie, mine will not, but if yours will, put some flaxseed in there or some hemp seeds or something that's full of omega-3s and they'll not even know that it's in there. But like I said, be cautious with not breaking trust. You don't,
For
if they
sure.
find out that you're sneaking them things that could, especially maybe not with the little kids, but like a teenager, that could definitely
Yeah.
cause some, disordered eating, and that's definitely not what we want to do. So the thing I've really seen that works is getting them involved in the process. So, letting them participate in, writing the store list, purchasing food, which right now, of course, kids can't really be going to the grocery store. So this is, maybe after this all ends, you can,
Hmm.
work that in. And, sometimes we're not able to take our kids to the store, whether it's for a behavioral reason or because it just doesn't fit our family. That's okay too. But they, have them help write the store list
Hmm.
or pick out recipes. When you get the food home, they can help with, prepping it and cooking
Hmm.
it. Um, I've got a
Greg used to
handout.
love, his favorite was to, we worked with his letters so much when he was younger too, where I'd say, okay, find the hamburger and cross that off. And he
Mm-hmm.
would find that. And that it was like something he did a lot. And then we did lessons when we were homeschooling where he would add up how much everything costs. And
Oh, that's a great idea.
you remember doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. Aiden's 13. He still loves to carry the store list,
Yeah,
So, just getting them involved can really make a difference. And I've got a handout that I made. I'll show you on the next page, but I'll put it on the Facebook page, which is kind of like a rainbow challenge. So,
awesome.
making sure that if they will eat them, we want to add as many colors of the rainbow as we can to our plate because every color has different nutrients and different phytonutrients that they provide. So, making it into a fun challenge can sometimes help. You could do a store scavenger hunt once things get back to normal, take them to the farmer's market and let them talk to the
Oh,
farmer.
yes.
Like that, Aiden loves to talk to people.
Oh,
Take
yeah.
him, let him talk to them and ask them, where did this come from? Where did you
Hmm.
grow this? Let them get involved in it. Something that's really worked for us is hyping up food on vacation. So if we know we're going on vacation, so I'm married to a chef, and I'm a nutritionist, so everything we do is based on food, including vacation. So when we go on vacation, it's all based on where we're going to eat, right? So we do a lot of food tours and things that are food based. So we'll usually hype Aiden up about them when it's getting time. We're getting close. Like we did a food tour in Charleston and there was a big group of us that went and we talked about it for like months and
Hmm.
he was super excited about it and I said I'll pay for you to go but you're going to have to try everything and
Hmm.
he did. He was so hyped up about it. Some of it he didn't like but he did try everything.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, and we got to this restaurant and they were serving ahi tuna
Hmm.
and he was like devoured his plate, ate my plate, and then ate the tour guide's plate. And so now every time we go on vacation to the beach, he's like, "Oh my gosh, I need some ahi tuna." You know, we
Yeah.
took him on a cruise, and they had all you can eat lobster, and he ate like 5 lobster tails.
Oh, my word.
He has expensive taste.
Yeah.
So, but now when we go on vacation, those are things that he looks forward to. So when we go to the beach house, he's like, "Oh my gosh, I can have ahi tuna." Or when we're going on, oh, we're running out of time. When we're going on vacation, he gets super excited about that. So, and also kids who watch child-oriented cooking shows are twice as likely to eat more healthy. So that's something to think about. So one more thing, because before we run out of time, that's the handout I'm going to throw up there. There is some ideas of like cookbooks that might get them more involved. You could look at their kind of favorite characters. This Harry Potter cookbook is awesome. Teen Titans, Beast Boys of Vegetarians. So, use their favorite characters to get them, kind of involved in that. So here's my story about Aiden. This is his breakfast. This is what he eats every day: peanut butter toast, Cheetos, and grapes. But he loves Naruto because he likes Japanese anime. So Naruto eats ramen noodles every day. Aiden is all about, can I get these ramen noodles? Can I get these ramen noodles? So Jared goes out and buys the stuff to make the ramen. He makes it just like the picture. Aiden eats the entire thing: the eggs, the pork, the seaweed, the bamboo shoots, the noodles, the bone broth, the entire bowl of it, and then asks like every week to make it.
Oh my gosh.
Just by him being invested in that show, he was willing to try that. Here he is with his lobster tail. So it works to get them involved, or let the things they are interested in kind of spark an interest.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So
would you eat those, buddy?
Eggs?
Would you eat those? I know you don't like eggs, but would you eat those ramen noodles?
Aiden doesn't like eggs either.
You would?
Yeah. We're going to have a ramen party after this is over. You guys can come over and we'll make ramen. So, definitely, getting them invested makes a huge difference, I think.
Crayons.
So, here's my contact info, and I'll put it up on the Facebook page.
Yes,
and I've
definitely.
also got an offer of some free sessions that I'm offering to the members of the group. So I'll put that information on the Facebook.
Yes, I love free stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And right now, everybody, it kind of is more of a self-care thing, but if you want to talk about your family's nutrition or anything, whatever I can help with right now.
That's
when everything's
amazing.
kind of crazy, then I'm more than happy to help with.
Amy, thank you so much. I am so grateful. You guys, I know 100% are going to be jealous that I get to be friends with Amy. She will be your friend, but I knew her first, so I just want to throw that out there.
Now we're gonna have a ramen party because Briggs, I'm gonna hold you to that. You told me you would eat it.
You will.
So after
you guys will have so much fun. Aiden can teach you how to use chopsticks, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, totally happening.
Well, thank you so much.
Gluten-free ramen too.
Yes, and I will get you guys all the information. We'll get this posted on the website as well as on the Facebook group, and take Amy up on these virtual lessons because
I'll post some information on the Facebook page tonight after we finish. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you, Bryn.
See ya.
You guys have a good night. Have a happy Easter.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.